He said it like a casual weather report, flat and bored, then slipped on his watch like my dignity was just lint on his cuff. I did not cry. I did not beg. I vanished so cleanly the silence started to terrify everyone except me, because while he was wondering why he chose me, he had been using my work as his ladder, and that last rung was going to snap in public. My name is Haley Morgan, and for the last 6 years, I have lived my life in the manicured silence of Riverton Heights. It is the kind of suburb outside St. Louis where the lawns are so green they look painted on. And the silence is not peaceful, but expectant. It is a place where people do not have problems. They have renovations. At 34, I thought I had built a life that was sturdy, grounded in competence and the quiet satisfaction of things being exactly where they belonged. I was a senior strategist at a consulting firm, a woman who knew how to manage crises for corporations. Yet I failed to see the crisis sitting across from me at the breakfast table for 190 days. Caleb Rourke was 36, and he was not just a husband, he was a curator. He curated his wine collection, his friendships, his career, and, I eventually realized, me. We had been together for 6 years, married for 3. To the outside world, we were the golden standard. Caleb was effortlessly polished, the kind of man who knew exactly how firm a handshake should be and exactly which fork to use without thinking. He was handsome in a way that felt designed rather than grown, with dark hair that never moved and a smile that he could adjust like a dimmer switch. The end did not start with a scream or a thrown vase. It started on a Tuesday evening, in the master bathroom that smelled of sandalwood and expensive ambition. We were preparing for the annual industry gala for his firm. This was Caleb's Super Bowl. He was standing in front of the double vanity, adjusting his cufflinks. The light in the bathroom was unforgivingly bright, bouncing off the marble and the chrome. I was wearing a navy dress he had selected for me 2 weeks prior. It was elegant, understated, and expensive. Armor for a battle I did not know I was fighting. I looked at him through the mirror. He was focused on his wrists, his brow furrowed in that serious, intense way that used to make my stomach flip with affection. I stepped closer, reaching out to smooth the fabric of his jacket across his shoulders. "You look incredible, Caleb," I said. My voice was soft, genuine. I wanted him to feel supported. I wanted him to know I was on his team. Caleb stopped moving. He did not turn around. He just lifted his eyes to meet mine in the glass. The silence stretched for 3 seconds, then 4. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of a microscope slide being adjusted. He sighed. A short, sharp exhale through his nose. Then he delivered the sentence that would dismantle my life. "Every time I look at you, I cannot help but wonder why I ever chose you." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating like smoke. I blinked. Sure, I had misheard. I waited for the punchline, the laugh, the clarification. But his face remained perfectly still, his eyes boring into my reflection with a mixture of boredom and mild irritation. "Excuse me?" I whispered. The blood was draining from my face. I could feel it leaving, retreating to my core as if preparing for a physical blow. He turned then, finally facing me. He looked at me not with hatred, but with a weary disappointment, as if I were a stain on a rug he had just realized he could not scrub out. "I am just being honest. Haley," he said, his tone flat, "do not make this into a thing. We are going to be late, and I need you to be on point tonight." He brushed past me, checking his watch, a Rolex I had bought him for his 35th birthday. He did not see a person standing there shattered by his cruelty. He saw an obstacle to his punctuality. I stood frozen in the bathroom. The hum of the ventilation fan sounded like a roar. My hands were trembling, but I clenched them into fists until the shaking stopped. I did not cry. I did not scream. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. This was not a slip of the tongue. This was a confession. "Haley, let's go," he called from the hallway, his voice impatient. I walked out of the bathroom. I picked up my clutch. I walked to the door. I was operating on autopilot, a survival mechanism kicking in that I did not know I possessed. The car ride was 20 minutes of suffocating quiet. Caleb drove with one hand on the wheel, humming along softly to a jazz track playing on the stereo. He was completely unbothered. He had discarded his cruelty the moment he spoke it, leaving me to carry the weight of it alone. I looked out the window at the passing streetlights, blurring into streaks of yellow and white. I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. When we arrived at the venue, the air was thick with humidity and the scent of expensive perfume. The gala was in full swing, crystal chandeliers, waiters with silver trays, the low roar of polite networking. As soon as we crossed the threshold, Caleb transformed, his posture straightened, his smile turned on like a light bulb, and he placed a hand on the small of my back. To everyone else, it looked like affection. To me, it felt like a brand. He was steering me. I watched him that night, for the first time in 6 years. I really watched him. I turned off the part of my brain that loved him and turned on the part of my brain that analyzed data for a living. I studied him like evidence. I saw the way his eyes scanned the room even while he was talking to someone. He was never fully present. He was always looking for the next best thing, the next important person, the next rung on the ladder. I saw the strategic laughter, short and polite for subordinates, loud and warm for executives. It was a performance, a seamless, terrifying performance. Then I saw the moment that sealed it. We were standing near the bar. Caleb was talking to a group of colleagues. There was a woman there, a junior associate named Sarah or maybe Samantha, someone young and eager. Caleb made a joke, something self-deprecating and charming. The group laughed. As the laughter died down, Caleb reached out and touched her arm. It was not a sexual grope. It was subtler than that. It was a lingering touch. His fingers resting on her forearm for 3 seconds too long, his eyes locking with hers in a way that excluded everyone else in the circle. It was a power move. He was feeding on her admiration. He was charming her just to prove he could, just to feel the reflection of his own greatness in her eyes. And I stood there, his wife of 3 years, holding his drink because he had handed it to me without asking, realizing that I was not his partner, I was his prop. I was the background character in the movie of Caleb Rourke. The line from the bathroom replayed in my head. Wonder why I ever chose you. He did not choose me for love. He chose me because at the time, I fit the role. I was presentable. I was successful enough to look good on paper, but not loud enough to overshadow him. I was the safe bet. And now, he was bored with the safety. He wanted to recast the role. I felt a physical nausea rise in my throat. I set his drink down on a high-top table. I walked over to him and touched his shoulder. He turned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before he masked it with a smile for his audience. "Caleb," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I have a migraine." It came on sudden and sharp. "I need to go." He looked at me, and for a split second, the mask slipped. There was no concern, no offer to drive me home, no worry about my health. There was only calculation. He was assessing if my departure would damage his image. He checked the room, then looked back at me. "Fine," he said. His voice clipped. "Take an Uber. I cannot leave right now. I have to talk to the VP of Operations in 10 minutes. He turned back to the group before I had even taken a step away. "Don't wait up." He threw over his shoulder. I walked out of the ballroom, past the coat check, past the valet stand. I walked until I was down the block, the sounds of the party fading into the humid night. I called a rideshare, my fingers steady on the screen. The ride home was silent. When I unlocked the door to our apartment, the silence that greeted me was different from the one in Riverton Heights. It was the silence of a dead thing. I turned on the hallway light. The apartment looked like a spread in a catalog. The beige sofa, the abstract art that Caleb had picked out because it matched the rug. The perfectly aligned books on the shelf. It felt like a staged set. It felt like nobody actually lived there, and perhaps nobody did. Caleb lived in his own ego, and I had been living in a delusion. I did not take off my heels. I walked straight to the bedroom. I pulled my suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. I did not pack everything. I did not want everything. I packed with surgical precision. I took my passport. I took my birth certificate and social security card from the safe. I took my laptop and my external hard drives. I took 7 days' worth of clothes, utilitarian things, jeans, blazers, sweaters. I left the dresses he liked. I left the jewelry he had bought me, including the diamond studs I was wearing. I took them out of my ears and placed them on the nightstand next to his side of the bed. I moved through the apartment like a ghost. I took my favorite mug. I took the small watercolor painting my niece had made for me. I took the cash I kept in my emergency drawer, $1,500 in 20s and 50s. It took me 45 minutes, my life, dismantled and packed into one suitcase and a carry-on bag. I stood in the kitchen one last time. I found a notepad and a pen. I debated writing a letter. I debated pouring out the 6 years of confusion and the fresh, raw hurt of tonight. But I realized that words were Caleb's currency. He could twist them, reframe them, argue with them. He could not argue with silence. I wrote one sentence. I am not the one who is confused about why we are together. I left the note on the marble island, right next to the bowl of organic lemons that were purely decorative. I wheeled my suitcase out the door. I locked it behind me. I dropped the key through the mail slot. It made a small, metallic clink as it hit the floor inside. That sound was the period at the end of a very long, very bad sentence. I got into my car, a sensible sedan that I had paid for myself. I started the engine. The clock on the dashboard read 1:14 in the morning. I drove. I did not go to a friend's house. Caleb knew my friends. He would charm them, spin the story, make me look like the hysterical wife having a breakdown. I needed to disappear. I drove 40 miles west, away from the manicured lawns of Riverton Heights, out towards the highway where the lights became sparse. I pulled into a roadside motel that had a neon sign buzzing with a dying letter E. It was the kind of place Caleb would never step foot in, which made it the safest place on earth. I paid for 3 nights in cash. The night clerk, a man with tired eyes, did not ask questions. He just slid a plastic key card across the counter. Room 104. He grunted. I parked around the back. The room smelled of bleach and stale cigarettes, but it had a lock, and it was mine. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. I took my phone out of my purse. I opened my contacts. I scrolled to Caleb's name. I did not text him. I did not call him to scream. I tapped the information icon. I scrolled to the bottom. I pressed block caller. Then I went to his email, his social media, his LinkedIn. Block, block, block. I watched his digital presence vanish from my phone. It was my first act of power. He had wondered why he chose me. He had treated me like an option, a convenience, a background extra. He thought he could break me with a sentence and dismiss me with a wave of his hand. I lay down on the motel bed, fully clothed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. I was alone. I was terrified. But for the first time in 3 years, I was not wondering what Caleb Rourke was thinking. I was wondering what I was going to do next. And the silence in the room was not empty. It was waiting. The sun came up over the motel parking lot at 5:45 in the morning. I knew the time because I had been staring at the red digital numbers on the bedside clock since 3. I did not greet the day with dread. I greeted it with a checklist. Panic is a luxury for people who have a safety net, and I had just cut mine loose. I was operating on a different frequency now, a cold, procedural survival mode where emotions were inefficiencies to be filed away for later processing. I got out of bed. The carpet was sticky, but I did not cringe. I walked to the shower, turned the handle until the water was scalding, and stepped in. I scrubbed my skin as if I could wash off the last 6 years of subtle undermining. I did not lean against the tiles and weep. I washed my hair. I shaved my legs. I conditioned the ends. I stepped out, dried off with a towel that smelled of industrial bleach, and put on the navy blazer and gray slacks I had packed the night before. I applied my makeup in the dim bathroom light. Foundation, concealer, mascara. My hand was steady. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a heartbroken wife. I saw a senior strategist at Argent Vale Strategies. I saw a woman who solved complex corporate problems for a living. My life was just another failing project that needed a restructure. I checked out of the motel at 6:30. I stopped at a drive-thru for a black coffee and an oatmeal. I ate in the car, parking 2 blocks away from my office building so I could arrive at exactly 7:45, my usual time. Argent Vale Strategies is a mid-sized consulting firm in the city center, a place of glass walls, muted gray carpets, and high stakes. I had worked there for 4 years, building a reputation as the person you call when you need the truth, not the sugar-coated version. I walked through the double doors, nodded to the receptionist, and went straight to my office. My assistant, David, was already there. He looked up, smiling. "Good morning, Haley," he said. "Good morning, David," I replied. My voice was level. "Can you pull the quarterly reports for the Grandview account? I want to review them before the 10 o'clock meeting." I sat at my desk and turned on my computer. The screen glowed to life, a familiar blue square of order in a chaotic world. For the next 9 hours, I was not Haley Morgan, the woman whose husband wondered why he chose her. I was Haley Morgan, the woman who knew exactly how to increase operational efficiency by 12%. Work was not a distraction. It was oxygen. It was the only place where the rules were clear and my value was quantifiable. During my lunch break, I did not eat. I closed my office door and opened a real estate app on my phone. I needed a base of operations. I was not going back to Riverton Heights. That life was a costume I had returned. I filtered the search results. I did not look for luxury. I looked for immediacy and security. I found a studio apartment in a converted warehouse district, 20 minutes from the office, 450 square feet, exposed brick, secure entry, available immediately. I called the leasing agent. "I can be there in 20 minutes. I said, "I have the deposit ready." I met the agent, a brisk woman named Carla, at 12:30. She walked me through the unit. It was small. The windows looked out onto an alleyway. It was empty and echoed when I walked across the hardwood floors. "It is small," Carla said, apologetically. "It is perfect," I said. I signed the lease electronically on my phone standing in the middle of the room. I transferred the first month's rent and the security deposit, $2,400 total. Right there. I got the keys. I did not buy furniture. I went to a big box store after work and bought an air mattress, a set of white sheets, 2 pillows, a coffee maker, a mug, a plate, and a fork. I bought a towel and a bar of soap. Foundation first, everything else was decoration. That night, alone in the echoey studio, I sat on the floor with my laptop. I created a new folder on my personal cloud drive. I did not name it divorce or evidence. I named it receipts. This was not about revenge, not yet. This was about reality. Caleb was a master of rewriting history. He could take a conversation and twist it until I was apologizing for something he had done. I knew that soon. The narrative would start to shift. I needed to anchor the truth before it floated away. I uploaded the screenshots of the text messages he had sent over the years. The ones where he subtly critiqued my appearance. The ones where he canceled plans last minute without apology. I uploaded the photo of the note I had left on the counter. I typed out a transcript of the conversation in the bathroom, word for word, including the timestamp. Every time I look at you, I cannot help but wonder why I ever chose you. My phone buzzed. It was Dylan Pratt. Dylan was a mutual friend, a man who thrived on being the information broker of our social circle. "Hey, Hales. Just talked to Caleb. He sounds super confused. Is everything okay? Are you guys taking a break?" I looked at the screen. I could see the trap. If I poured my heart out, Dylan would relay it to Caleb. And Caleb would use my emotions to paint me as unstable. If I stayed silent, Dylan would fill in the blanks with Caleb's version. I typed a single sentence. "I am taking some time for myself." "Dylan," I hit send. Then I muted his notifications. I did not owe him the gory details of my humiliation. 10 minutes later, a text from Sophie Lane came through. Sophie was sweet, but she was pathologically averse to conflict. She believed every problem could be solved with a hug and a compromise. "Haley, sweetie, please call me. Caleb is a mess. He said you just left? You guys are perfect together. Whatever it is, you can fix it. Do not throw away 6 years over a fight." I felt a flash of anger. Hot and sharp. A fight. Caleb had already framed it as a petty squabble. He had reduced the total annihilation of my self-worth to a fight. I recognized the rewrite tactic. If I engaged, I would be participating in the negotiation of my own dignity. I typed nothing. I deleted the thread. Then, the email came. I saw the notification banner slide down the top of my screen. Sender: Caleb Rourke. Subject: Let's be adults. My heart hammered against my ribs, a traitorous physical reaction. I opened the email, my eyes scanning the text with the same cold precision I used for legal contracts. "Haley, this is ridiculous. I come home and you are gone? Because of one comment?" I was tired. I was stressed about the gala. "You know how much pressure I am under. If you want to blow up our marriage because I was honest about my feelings for 1 second, that is on you. But do not ghost me. We need to talk about the lease and the upcoming trip to Cabo. Come home. Stop being dramatic." I read it twice. There was no apology. There was no, "I love you." There was only justification and blame. He was framing my departure as a reaction to his honesty, making his cruelty sound like a virtue. He called me dramatic. He worried about the lease and a vacation. I felt a strange sense of relief. The man in this email was the real Caleb. The charming husband was the mask. This entitled, dismissive man was the face underneath. I did not reply. I did not type out a furious defense. I saved the email as a PDF. I dragged it into the receipts folder. Then I archived the message so I would not have to look at it every time I opened my inbox. The next morning, I joined a 24-hour gym 3 blocks from my studio. I went at 5 in the morning. I did not go to the cardio machines. I went to the free weights. I had never lifted heavy before. I hired a trainer for 1 session to show me the form for a deadlift. Keep your back straight. He told me, drive through your heels. I loaded the bar. 65 pounds, then 85, then 95. The physical sensation was grounding. The iron did not care about my marriage. The iron did not gaslight me. If I could lift it, I could lift it. If I could not, I could not. It was honest. I went to the gym every morning before work. I pushed my body until my muscles trembled, until the only thing I could focus on was the count. 1, 2, 3, 4. It anchored my nervous system. It burned off the cortisol that was flooding my veins. I was not training to look good for a revenge dress. I was training to survive. Work became my fortress. At Argent Vale, I took on 2 new clients. I arrived early. I stayed late. My colleagues noticed a shift. "You are on fire lately." Haley, my boss, Marcus, said to me after a presentation, "Focused. I like it." He did not know that I was focused because if I stopped moving, I would shatter. I was hardening. My boundaries were becoming steel walls. When a junior consultant tried to dump his work on me, I did not smile and say sure. "No problem, like the old Haley. I am at capacity." I told him, my voice flat, "You will need to handle that yourself." He looked shocked, but he nodded and walked away. I realized then that my agreeableness had been a weakness. I had spent my life trying to be easy to love, and all it had gotten me was a husband who wondered why he chose me. I was done being easy. 7 days after I left the apartment in Riverton Heights, I unlocked the door to my studio at 8 in the evening. The air mattress was set up in the corner, made up with the crisp white sheets. The room smelled of coffee and the lavender cleaning spray I had bought. It was empty. There was no television. There was no art on the walls. There was just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I took a shower. I put on a clean t-shirt. I lay down on the air mattress. For the last week, I had slept in fitful bursts, waking up every 2 hours with my heart racing. reaching for a body that was not there. But tonight, something was different. I looked at the ceiling. I listened to the distant sound of traffic. I checked my phone one last time. 0 notifications from the people who mattered, because I had blocked the person who hurt me. The quiet in the room did not feel lonely. It felt deliberate. It felt like a space I had carved out of the world with my own hands. I was paying for this silence. I was earning this peace. I closed my eyes. My breathing slowed. The knot in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. I slept for 8 straight hours. No dreams, no panic, just deep, black, restorative sleep. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was hitting the brick wall, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I stretched my limbs, feeling the soreness from the deadlifts, a good, honest pain. I was sore, I was alone, and I was sleeping on an air mattress. But for the first time in 3 years, I belonged to myself. 3 weeks turned into 6, and 6 weeks turned into a season of deliberate, colorless order, my life, which had once been a chaotic orbit around the burning sun of Caleb's ego, had settled into a rhythm so predictable it felt like medication. Wake up at 5, gym at 5:30, office by 7:45, work until 7, home, grilled chicken and vegetables, read, sleep, repeat. To an outsider, it might have looked stark, perhaps even depressing. To me, it was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what would happen next. There were no sudden mood shifts to manage, no passive-aggressive comments about the dust on the baseboards, no dinner parties where I had to perform the role of the adoring wife while he made subtle digs at my intelligence. Predictability was not boring. Predictability was healing. At Argent Veil Strategies, my immersion in work had shifted from a distraction to a defining characteristic. I was no longer just efficient. I was formidable. I had stopped softening my emails with exclamation points. I had stopped apologizing for taking up space in meetings. It was Naomi Briggs who noticed it first. Naomi was a director in the analytics department, a woman who wore sharp glasses and possessed a bullshit detector that I had always admired from a distance. We had been friendly before, exchanging pleasantries by the coffee machine, but we had never been close. One Tuesday afternoon, after a grueling 3-hour strategy session where I had dismantled a client's faulty marketing plan with nothing but data and a dry tone, Naomi caught up with me in the hallway. "You are different," she said. She did not phrase it as a question. I tightened my grip on my laptop. "Is it a problem?" I asked, my defenses instantly rising. "No," Naomi said, matching my stride. "It is effective. You used to hesitate before you spoke, like you were checking an invisible script. Today, you just spoke. You are locked in. Haley, whatever you changed, keep doing it." She did not ask about my ringless finger. She did not ask why I was in the office at 7 in the morning every day. She recognized the focus because she likely possessed it herself. In a world of oversharing and trauma bonding, Naomi offered me the greatest gift a colleague could give: professional respect without personal intrusion. She became a silent anchor for me at work, a nod across the boardroom table that said, "I see you, and you are doing fine." But while my work life was hardening into something diamond-sharp, the digital ghost of my marriage was becoming a poltergeist. Caleb was not handling the silence well. My initial block of his number in social media had worked for the first week, but Caleb was a man who viewed boundaries as challenges. He began to escalate. It started with emails from new addresses. Caleb, Rourke, personal, C. Rourke 88, Caleb, work, urgent. The subject lines shifted from annoyed to apologetic to panicked. "Haley, please read. Important tax info. I am sorry. I did not delete them. I did not reply to them. I filed them. Every single one went into the receipts folder." I was building a timeline of harassment, although he would have called it fighting for his marriage. Then came the calls from unknown numbers. I let them go to voicemail. I never picked up. My phone was set to silence unknown callers, so I would only see the notification after the fact. Missed call. No caller ID. Missed call. No caller ID. On a rainy Thursday in November, I sat on the floor of my studio apartment. I had bought a rug, a cheap, geometric thing, and a single armchair. I was drinking tea and reviewing a slide deck when my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I stared at it. The transcription feature was struggling to decode the message, which meant he had been speaking fast or shouting. I put down my tea. I put on my headphones. I needed to hear the tone. I needed to know the temperature of the water I was swimming in. I pressed play. "Haley, this is ridiculous." His voice filled my ears, intimate and jarring. It sounded like he was standing in the room. "I have called your parents. I have called your sister. Nobody knows where you are, or they are lying to me. You are acting like a child. You think you are being strong? You are being a coward. You ran away because you could not handle one moment of real honesty. You want to leave? Fine, but have the decency to say it to my face. Come back and prove me wrong. Show me I made a mistake, because right now, you are just proving that I was right to doubt us. Call me back." The message ended with a click. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the rain tapping against the window pane. I played it again, and then a third time. "Come back and prove me wrong." The sentence hung in the air, vibrating with entitlement. In the past, that sentence would have been a hook in my gill. The old Haley, the one who lived to please him, would have heard that challenge and risen to it. I would have rushed back to explain, to demonstrate my worth, to argue my case, to show him that I was good enough, strong enough, worthy enough of his choice. But the Haley sitting on the floor of a 450-square-foot studio felt nothing but a cold, clinical realization. He did not want me back because he loved me. He wanted me back so I could audition for him again. He viewed our marriage not as a partnership, but as a tenure-track position where he was the dean. He expected me to submit a portfolio of my behavior for his review. He genuinely believed that the way to fix this was for me to return and perform better, to jump higher, to be less boring or whatever flaw he had hallucinated in the mirror that night. The insult, calling me a coward, was not an emotional outburst. It was a worldview, to him. My refusal to engage in his drama was cowardice. To me, it was the first brave thing I had ever done. I took a deep breath. I did not cry. I opened my laptop. I downloaded the voicemail audio file. I saved it to the receipts folder. I opened a spreadsheet I had started titled Contact Log. Date, November 12th. Time, 8:42 p.m. Type, voicemail from restricted number. Content, caller, Caleb Rourke. Insult subject, Haley Morgan. Calls her a coward. Demands contact to prove him wrong. Tone, aggressive, demanding. I typed it out with the detachment of a court stenographer. There was no drama in the spreadsheet. There were just facts. Facts were weapons that never jammed. The next day, I took the day off work. I did not spend it crying in bed. I spent it executing the administrative erasure of Caleb Rourke from my existence. I went to the bank. I opened a new checking account at a completely different institution, one he had no history with. I transferred the remainder of my personal savings. I set up credit monitoring alerts on my Social Security number. Paranoid that he might try to access our joint finances to track my location or ruin my credit score out of spite. I changed every password I owned, my email, my streaming services, my airline miles, my pharmacy login. I changed the security questions. What is your mother's maiden name? I changed the answer to a random string of 16 alphanumeric characters that I saved in an encrypted password manager. The truth was no longer safe. Only encryption was safe. I logged into my company's HR portal. I navigated to the emergency contact section. It still listed Caleb Rourke, husband. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. I hit delete. I typed in Dylan Vasquez, my younger brother who lived in Chicago. We did not talk often, but he was loyal, and he hated Caleb. I sent Dylan a quick text. I put you as my emergency contact at work. I left Caleb. I am safe. Please do not tell Mom yet. He replied 3 minutes later, "Done. Proud of you. Let me know if you need me to fly down and break his kneecaps." I smiled. a small, dry movement of my lips. It was the first time I had smiled at a text in months. "Just handle the call if I get hit by a bus," I replied. I was exiting the narrative. That was how I framed it to myself. Caleb was trying to write a tragedy where he was the misunderstood hero and I was the unstable villain who vanished. Our mutual friends were the chorus, echoing his confusion. Sophie Lane tried again. She sent a long text message about how Caleb was really hurting and how marriage is hard work. I realized then that Sophie was not my friend. She was an audience member who wanted the show to continue. She was uncomfortable with my disruption because it made her question her own compromises. I did not block Sophie, but I restricted her access. I stopped sharing my location. I stopped viewing her stories. I stopped explaining myself. "I appreciate your concern, Sophie, but I am not discussing this anymore." I wrote, it was polite. It was final. It was a door slamming shut, painted to look like a polite decline. Work continued to be my sanctuary. My focus was yielding results that were impossible to ignore. 2 weeks after the voicemail incident, Marcus, the senior partner, called me into his office. "Haley, the client was impressed with the structural audit you did for the logistics firm." He said, he was sitting behind his mahogany desk, looking at a printout. "You found redundancies that 3 other consultants missed. I just followed the data." "Marcus," I said. He looked at me over his glasses. "You are taking lead on the Meridian project," he said. "It is a high-visibility initiative. You will present at the summit next month." The Meridian project was the kind of assignment people killed for. It was a career maker. A year ago, I would have demurred. I would have worried that the travel schedule would upset Caleb. I would have worried that shining too bright would make Caleb feel dim. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "I will have the preliminary outline on your desk by Monday." I walked out of his office with my pulse steady. I did not feel a rush of euphoria. I felt the satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place. I was good at this. I was valuable here, and I did not have to audition for this value. I just had to deliver it. That night, walking home from the gym, the air was crisp and cold. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement. I stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. I looked at my reflection in the glass of a storefront window. I was wearing a thick wool coat and a scarf. My hair was pulled back. I looked tired. Yes, there were shadows under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. But the anxiety that had lived in my chest for 6 years, the constant, humming dread that I was doing something wrong, that I was about to be criticized, was gone. It had been replaced by a strange, quiet peace. It was not happiness. Happiness felt like a distant, frivolous concept, like a balloon that had floated away. This was something heavier. It was clarity. I saw the world as it was, not as Caleb wanted me to see it. I saw that I was capable. I saw that he was manipulative. I saw that I could survive on an air mattress and eat grilled chicken and feel more whole than I ever felt in a designer dress holding his arm. The light changed. I walked across the street. Clarity, I realized, was addictive. Once you tasted it, once you saw the strings that had been controlling you, you could never go back to being a puppet. I checked my phone, no notifications. I walked into my building, keyed into the lobby, and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I unlocked my door and deadbolted it behind me. I checked the receipts folder one last time before bed. There was nothing new. Caleb was quiet for now, but I knew it was the quiet before a different kind of storm. He had tried charm. He had tried anger. He was running out of tactics. And a man like Caleb Rourke was most dangerous when he was losing control. I closed the laptop. I turned off the light. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the city, and for the first time, I did not wonder what he was doing. I wondered what I was going to wear to the Meridian Summit. I wondered how I was going to present the data. I wondered how high I could climb now that I was not carrying 180 pounds of dead weight. The silence I had purchased with my sudden departure was not empty. It was heavy with the pressure of 1,000 unsaid words. Riverton Heights did not like a vacuum. It was a community built on the illusion of cohesion, and my refusal to play the part of the grieving, confused wife was creating a fracture that the collective immune system of our social circle was trying to repair. They did not come at me with pitchforks. They came with olive branches dipped in poison. It started with the soft tribunal. This was not a formal meeting, but a coordinated effort by our mutual friends to drag me back into the fold so the status quo could be restored. They did not care about my happiness. They cared about their own comfort. A failed marriage in the group was a contagion, and they wanted to quarantine it before it spread. I received a group text at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. It included Sophie, Dylan, and 3 other women from the inner circle, wives of Caleb's colleagues, women I had brunched with, women whose baby showers I had planned. Haley, we are all at the bistro. We miss your face. Please just come for a drink. No drama, just girls. We are worried about you. It was the phrase worried about you that made my stomach turn. It was the ultimate gaslighting tool. It framed my autonomy as a mental health crisis. It implied that leaving a man who despised me was a symptom of sickness, not an act of sanity. I stared at the phone in my studio apartment. I could picture the scene. They were likely already dissecting my breakdown, trading theories about hormonal imbalances or work stress. If I went, I would be walking into an ambush. They would tilt their heads, touch my arm, and gently suggest that I was overreacting. They would tell me that Caleb was destroyed. They would ask me to be the bigger person, because that is what women are always asked to be when men behave badly. I did not reply to the group. I did not offer an excuse. I simply deleted the thread. 2 days later, the second wave hit. This time, it was family. Tara Rourke, Caleb's cousin, was a woman who prided herself on being the peacemaker of the Rourke dynasty. She was the kind of person who believed that family was a magic word that erased all sins. She called me 3 times in a row while I was reviewing a spreadsheet at work. I let them go to voicemail. Then came the text, long and breathless. Haley, I know you are going through something, but you need to know that Caleb is in a bad way. He has lost weight. He's not sleeping. He came over yesterday and just sat in the kitchen and stared at the wall. He loves you so much. Whatever he said, he didn't mean it. You know how he gets when he's stressed. Please, for the sake of the family, just call him. Don't throw away a decade of history because of pride. I read the message with clinical detachment. You know how he gets? Yes, I did know how he got. I knew exactly how he got, and for 6 years, I had absorbed how he got so that nobody else had to. Tara was not asking me to reconcile with my husband. She was asking me to resume my post as his emotional shock absorber so he would stop bothering them. I typed a reply. I kept it surgical. Tara, I am not coming back. Please do not contact me about Caleb again. I hit send. Then I tapped the info icon. Block caller. I did not feel guilty. I felt lighter. I was severing the nerves that connected me to a dead limb, but my refusal to engage had consequences. The narrative in Riverton Heights began to shift. I could feel it in the few interactions I still had with the periphery of that world. The concern morphed into judgment. I was no longer the poor, confused wife. I was the villain. The labels drifted back to me through the few channels I had left open. I was cold. I was dramatic. I was too proud. The story Caleb was spinning, and that they were eagerly consuming, was that I had snapped. I had spiraled. I had vanished without warning due to some internal defect, leaving a perfect, loving husband in the wreckage. It was a brilliant strategy. By painting me as unstable, Caleb immunized himself against anything I might say in the future. If I spoke up about his emotional abuse, it would just be seen as more drama from the unstable ex-wife. I wanted to scream. I wanted to print out the emails in my receipts folder and staple them to the telephone poles in the suburbs. I wanted to send the audio file of his voicemail to every person who called me cold, but I did not. Defending myself was a trap. If I argued, I looked defensive. If I engaged, I looked emotional. The only way to win was to refuse to play the game. I channeled my rage into the iron at the gym. I deadlifted 135 pounds. I squatted until my legs shook. I turned the anger into muscle. Then, the threat moved from social to professional. It was a Friday morning. Naomi Briggs walked into my office and closed the door. She did not sit down. She stood by the window, looking out at the gray city skyline. "Haley," she said, her voice low. "I was at a mixer last night for the Chamber of Commerce. I looked up from my monitor. My fingers paused on the keyboard. And?" I asked. "There was a guy there," Naomi said, "marketing director for a logistics firm. But he was asking questions about you, not professional questions." "What kind of questions?" I asked, my blood running cold. "He asked where you were living now," Naomi said, turning to face me. "He asked if you were dating anyone. He asked if you were still taking the train, or if you had bought a car. He made it sound like he was interested in you. But it felt off. It felt specific." I stared at her. "Caleb. He was not just gossiping. He was gathering intelligence. He needed to know where I was. He needed to know if I was moving on. He needed to control the story. And to do that, he needed to know the plot." "Did you tell him anything?" I asked. Naomi shook her head. "I told him you were busy and that I did not know your personal details. But Haley," she paused, her eyes sharp behind her glasses, "this isn't just a bad breakup. He is hunting." I nodded slowly. I knew she was right. That afternoon, I did not go home. I went to a law firm in the financial district. I did not choose a divorce lawyer who advertised on billboards with aggressive slogans. I chose a firm that specialized in corporate liability and reputation management. I needed a strategist, not a pit bull. The lawyer was a woman named Eleanor Vance. She was 60 years old, with silver hair cut into a sharp bob and a suit that cost more than my first car. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. I showed her the receipts folder. I played the voicemail. I showed her the text from Tara. "I am not ready to file for divorce yet." I told her, "I want to be ready, but right now, I just want him to stop." Eleanor took off her glasses and cleaned them with a silk cloth. "He won't stop." "Ms. Morgan," she said, "men like this do not stop until they win or until they are forced to find a new target. He is escalating because his standard tactics, charm, guilt, gaslighting, are failing. He is losing control, and that makes him dangerous." She leaned forward. "We are not going to send a cease and desist yet," she said. "That is a declaration of war, and it might provoke him before you are fully fortified. Instead, we are going to build a moat. You are going to continue documenting everything, every call, every text, every time a mutual friend reaches out. We are building a pattern of behavior. If he shows up at your work, if he shows up at your home, we will have the ammunition for a restraining order that will actually stick. But for now, silence is your best weapon. Do not give him any fuel." I left her office feeling grim but steady. I had a plan. The following week, the pressure intensified. I ran into an old acquaintance, a woman named Jessica, at a coffee shop near my office. It was unavoidable. She saw me before I could turn away. "Haley," she exclaimed, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, nobody has seen you in months. Caleb says you just vanished. He says you're having a really hard time." She looked at me with that pitying expression, searching my face for cracks, for signs of the spiral Caleb had promised her. I stood tall. I was wearing my tailored blazer. I looked her in the eye. "I am actually doing very well." "Jessica," I said calmly. "But," she faltered. "Caleb said you left without even talking to him. He said you just snapped." I did not get angry. I did not launch into a defense. I delivered the line I had practiced in the mirror, the single sentence that Eleanor had approved. I left after he said what he said. I told her, "That is all." Jessica blinked. "What did he say?" she asked. Her curiosity piqued. I smiled. A cool, closed-mouth smile. "Ask him." I said. I walked away. I left her standing there with the question. It was a tactical strike. By refusing to explain, I created a vacuum of my own. I forced them to wonder what could be so bad that a sensible, competent woman like Haley Morgan would walk away from a perfect marriage. I planted a seed of doubt in Caleb's perfect narrative. The discipline required to maintain this silence was excruciating. There were nights when I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops. I wanted to tell them about the mirror scene. I wanted to tell them about the years of subtle insults. But I knew that the moment I started explaining, I lost. I became a machine of routine. Work, gym, home, document, work, gym, home, document. I stopped looking at the blocked call list. I stopped wondering what Tara was saying to my mother. I focused entirely on the things I could control. My billable hours went up. My deadlift went up to 150 pounds. My bank account grew. And then, the war shifted fronts. It was a Tuesday night. Late. I was at the office, finishing up the preliminary data set for the Meridian project. The office was empty. The lights dimmed to the emergency setting. It was just me and the glow of my monitors. My phone buzzed. It was not a text. It was an automated alert from the Argent Vale security system. Security alert. Unusual login attempt detected. I frowned. I picked up the phone. User. H. Morgan. Location. Riverton Heights. IP address. Time. 9:45 p.m. My breath hitched in my throat. I was not in Riverton Heights. I was in the city center. Someone was trying to log into my work account from my old home IP address. It was not a hacker in a basement in a foreign country. It was Caleb. He still had my old laptop, the one I had left behind because it was technically his, bought with his card. But I had wiped it. I had logged out of everything. Or so I thought. He was trying to access my work email. He was trying to get into the Argent Vale server. I stared at the screen, the red alert pulsing like a heartbeat. This was not just a husband trying to spy on his wife. This was an attempt to breach corporate security. This was an attempt to sabotage my livelihood. If he got in, he could delete files. He could send emails in my name. He could destroy the reputation I was rebuilding brick by brick. He was not just trying to control the narrative anymore. He was trying to cut off my oxygen. I did not panic. The old Haley would have panicked. The new Haley. The one forged in the silence of a studio apartment and the discipline of the weight room, felt a cold, sharp anger. He had crossed a line. He had stepped out of the domestic sphere and into the one place where I had absolute power, my career. I took a screenshot of the alert. I saved it to the receipts folder. Then I opened a new email. To IT. Security. Subject. Urgent. Unauthorized access attempt. I began to type. I did not make it messy. I made it accurate. I was about to turn the light on, and Caleb Rourke had no idea that he was standing in the glare. The red alert on my screen did not pulse like a heartbeat. It glared like an accusation. I sat in the darkened office for a long time, staring at the timestamp, 9:45 p.m. Location, Riverton Heights. The device signature was generic, but the IP address was as familiar to me as my own social security number. It was the router in the home I had paid for, broadcasting from the study where I had spent countless nights working while Caleb watched television in the other room. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I took a screenshot. Then I opened the Properties tab of the alert and took a screenshot of the raw metadata. Then I shut down my computer, packed my bag, and walked out of the building. My hands were not shaking. They were cold, steady, and terrifyingly capable. The next morning, I arrived at Argent Vale Strategies at 7:15. I did not go to my desk. I went straight to the 4th floor, to the server room that hummed with the sound of cooling fans and expensive secrets. I knocked on the glass door of Ben Schroeder's office. Ben was the director of IT security, a man who spoke in binary and trusted no one who used the word synergy, Haley. He said, looking up from a bank of monitors, "You are here early. I had a security alert last night." "Ben," I said, keeping my voice low, "I need you to look at something." I handed him the printout of the screenshot. Ben adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the alphanumeric strings. He frowned. "Unauthorized access attempt," he muttered. Credentials were correct, but the two-factor authentication blocked it. This came from a residential IP. I know the IP. I said, "It is my old house." Ben looked at me, his eyebrows raising slightly. He knew I was separated. The rumor mill at Argent Vale was efficient. "Do you want me to flag it as a hostile intrusion?" he asked. "We can lock the account, force a global reset, and blacklist the IP." I hesitated. If I flagged it as hostile immediately, it might trigger an automatic legal notification. I needed to know the scope of the damage before I declared war. "I want an audit first." I said, "I want you to pull the access logs for my user profile for the last 12 months. I want to know every time my account was accessed from that specific IP address or any device associated with that MAC address." 12 months? Ben asked. "That is a lot of data." "Haley, I need to know." "Ben, please, keep it off the official incident report for now. Just raw data." He nodded, typing a command into his terminal. "Give me 2 hours." I went back to my office, but I could not work. The suspicion that had planted itself in my gut the night before was growing into a vine, choking out my focus. Caleb was not just a scorned husband trying to read his wife's emails to see if she was dating someone. Caleb was a strategist. He did not do things without a return on investment. At 10:30, Ben messaged me on the internal secure chat, "Come down." When I walked back into his office, Ben was not looking at his screens. He was looking at me, and his expression was grim. He turned the monitor so I could see. It was a spreadsheet, row after row of data, dates, times, durations, and file paths. It was not just last night. "Haley," Ben said softly. I leaned in. The list scrolled down. October 14th, September 2nd, August 21st, July 10th. My eyes traced the file paths. These were not emails. These were project directories. Grandview Logistics, Restructuring Proposal, Meyer Sons, Efficiency Audit, Internal Frameworks, Crisis Management Playbook. He has been logging in for months. Ben said, "Usually late at night. The sessions are long, 40 minutes, an hour." He was downloading files. I felt the blood drain from my face. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep the room from spinning. The dates went back 6 months, while I was sleeping in our bed, while I was making him dinner, while I was sitting next to him on the sofa. Caleb had been accessing my work server. "But how?" I whispered. Ben pointed to a line in the metadata. "He is using a device authorized on the network. Caleb's iPad." I closed my eyes. I remembered, 2 years ago, I had used his iPad to check a file during an emergency on a Sunday. I must have saved the login credentials. I had thought nothing of it. We were married. What was mine was his. I thanked Ben, asked him to print the full report, and walked back to my office like a zombie. I sat at my desk and opened my receipts folder. I opened the new file Ben had given me, and then I opened my old personal calendar, the one I had synced to my phone during the marriage. I started to cross-reference. Log entry, August 12th, 9:30 p.m. File accessed. Supply chain optimization models. I checked my calendar for August 12th. Dinner with the Rourkes. Caleb stayed home. Headache. I felt a wave of nausea. He had not had a headache. He had waited for me to leave, then logged into my work account to study my models. Log entry, September 5th, 11 p.m. File accessed. Client pitch deck. Tech startups. I checked the calendar. Caleb working late in the study. I remembered that night. I had brought him tea. He had angled the screen away from me, smiling that tight, polished smile. Just finishing up some research. "Babe," he had said, "go to bed." He was not doing research. He was stealing. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Caleb Rourke, the man who wondered why he chose me. The man who treated my career as a cute little hobby compared to his high-powered finance job, had been mining my intellect to polish his own credibility. He had been using my frameworks, my data analysis, my strategies. He had been stripping them of my name and likely presenting them as his own insights. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that it transcended anger. It was almost impressive in its depravity. He had devalued me to my face while simultaneously harvesting my value behind my back. I was not just a wife to him. I was a resource. And he was angry now not because he lost his wife, but because he lost his ghostwriter. I needed air. I needed to talk to someone who understood the industry. I messaged Naomi, "Lunch, now, please." We met at a deli 2 blocks away. I did not eat. I laid the audit report on the table between us. I told her everything. Naomi listened, her face hardening with every sentence. She did not look shocked. She looked resigned. "I knew it," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Haley, think about the industry events." Naomi said, "Caleb works in private equity, but lately, he has been positioning himself as an operations expert. I heard him speaking at the Mixer last week. He was talking about frictionless supply chain integration. He used the exact phrase, operational velocity. That is my phrase," I said. My voice shaking, "I coined that in the Meyer proposal." "I know," Naomi said. "That is why I thought it was weird. I thought maybe you guys talked shop at home. I thought maybe you were helping him, but he was selling it like it was his proprietary philosophy. He is building a brand, Haley, and he is building it with your bricks." I looked out the window at the busy street. People were rushing by, living their lives, unaware that the person closest to them might be a parasite in a bespoke suit. "He is not just stalking me," I said. "He is trying to get back in because I cut off the supply. He tried to log in last night because he has a presentation coming up and he needs fresh material." Naomi nodded. "And now that he cannot get it, he is going to get desperate." I went back to the office with a cold resolve. I was done being the victim. I was done being the silent, dignified ex-wife. I was a senior strategist, and I was going to protect my intellectual property. I requested a meeting with HR and the managing partner, Marcus. I did not ask for a therapy session. I asked for a security review. I walked into the conference room at 3:00. I laid the IT audit on the table. My ex-husband has been accessing company files using an old authorized device. I stated clearly, "This is a breach of confidentiality. I have isolated the documents he accessed. None of them contain sensitive client financial data, but they do contain proprietary Argent Veil methodologies." Marcus looked at the report, his face turning red. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. 6 months. I said. HR, represented by a woman named Linda, looked nervous. "Haley, this is a domestic issue that has bled into the workplace," she said, her tone cautious. "If we pursue this legally, it could get messy. We have to consider the optics of a lawsuit against a spouse. It looks like a divorce dispute." I turned to look at Linda. I did not blink. "This is not a divorce dispute. Linda," I said, "this is corporate espionage. He stole company property. The fact that he slept in my bed while he did it is irrelevant to the statute. But the publicity—" Linda started. I cut her off. "I am not making it messy," I said, my voice like ice. "I am making it accurate. If we do not document this, and he uses our frameworks at a competitor, we are liable for not protecting our IP. I am asking for a formal internal investigation, and I am asking for my current assignment to be changed." Marcus looked up. "Changed to what?" "I want to lead the Project Vanguard initiative." I said, Vanguard was an internal black box project. It was high level, high security, and completely severed from the external network. It required biometric login. If I am on Vanguard, I said, he cannot touch my work. I disappear from the grid, and while I am there, I will help legal compile the evidence of what he stole. Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at the audit report again. He looked at me. He saw a woman who was not asking for permission. She was offering a solution to a problem she had solved before he even knew it existed. "Done," Marcus said. "You start on Vanguard tomorrow. And Linda, notify legal. We are sending a preservation letter to Mr. Rourke." I walked out of that meeting feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I had closed the gate. I had secured the perimeter. I spent the rest of the afternoon moving my files to the secure Vanguard server. I watched the progress bar fill up. green, steady, complete. Every file that moved was a piece of my mind that Caleb could no longer touch. At 6 o'clock, I packed up. I felt tired, but clean. I had scrubbed the stain out of my professional life. Naomi was waiting for me by the elevators. She looked hesitant, holding her phone in her hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I am better than okay." I said, "I am secure." She bit her lip. She looked at her phone, then at me. "I debated showing you this," she said, "but after what you told me today, I think you need to know the whole board." She turned the screen toward me. It was a photo from Instagram. It was posted 3 hours ago from a FinTech Future Summit happening downtown. In the center of the frame was Caleb. He looked radiant. He was wearing a suit I recognized, holding a glass of champagne. He looked successful, unbothered, the very picture of a man on the rise, and standing right next to him, with her hand possessively on his bicep, was a woman. She was tall, with dark, glossy hair and a smile that looked like it had been sharpened with a whetstone. I knew her. Not personally, but I knew the ghost of her. It was Veronica Lane. Veronica was the ex-girlfriend Caleb had talked about when we first started dating. She was the ambitious one, the one who was too intense, the one he had outgrown but clearly never forgotten. She was the shadow that had always hovered in the corners of our marriage. The standard of excitement I was supposed to measure up to. I stared at the photo. The caption read, "Power couple moves, big things coming." The stomach drop I felt this time was different. It was not fear. It was clarity, sharp and absolute. Naomi watched my face. She is a VP at a rival consulting firm. Naomi said softly. The puzzle pieces locked together with a deafening click. Caleb was not just stealing my work to look smart. He was stealing my work to impress her. He was using my strategies to buy his way into her world. He had replaced the safe wife with the power partner, and he was funding his entry fee with the intellectual capital he had stolen from me. I looked at the photo one last time. I memorized the look on his face, the arrogance, the preening satisfaction. "Send it to me," I said to Naomi. She looked surprised. "Why?" "Because," I said, walking into the elevator and pressing the button for the lobby. "It goes in the receipts folder." I watched the doors close, cutting off the view of the office. Caleb thought he had upgraded. He thought he had won. He had no idea that by bringing Veronica into the picture, he had just given me the final variable I needed to solve the equation. He was not just a thief anymore. He was a conspirator. And conspiracies were much easier to dismantle than marriages. The Meridian Leadership Summit was held in a glass and steel monolith in downtown Chicago, a venue that smelled of roasting coffee and high-end upholstery. It was the kind of place where the air conditioning was set to a temperature that required a jacket, and the ambient noise was a low, steady hum of deal-making. I checked into my hotel room on the 34th floor the night before my presentation. I did not order room service. I did not stare out the window wondering if Caleb was looking at the same moon. I ironed my shirt. I reviewed my slide deck. I drank a liter of water. I went to sleep. The next morning, standing in front of the full-length mirror, I made a choice. In the movies, the scorned woman wears a red dress. She wears something cut low, something dangerous, something designed to make the man regret his loss through the sheer force of her physical beauty. I did not want Caleb to regret losing a body. I wanted him to realize he had lost a mind. I chose a suit in a deep, slate gray, tailored so perfectly it looked like it had been poured onto me. It was not severe. It was architectural. A silk cream blouse, high-necked and elegant, simple gold hoops. My hair was blown out smooth, tucked behind one ear. When I looked at myself, I did not see a woman who was recovering from a divorce. I saw a woman who commanded a room rate of $400 an hour. This was not a revenge costume. It was a uniform of authority. I was not there to be looked at. I was there to be listened to. I took the elevator down to the grand ballroom. The summit was a sea of navy blazers and lanyards. 2 years ago, I would have walked into this room scanning for Caleb, making sure I was not standing in his light. making sure I was introducing him to the right people. Today, I walked into the center of the room and stood there, checking my phone, comfortable in my own gravity. My presentation was scheduled for 10 o'clock. The topic was the architecture of trust, data transparency, and crisis management. It was based on the work I had done for the Vanguard initiative, sanitized for public consumption. When the moderator announced my name, I walked up the steps to the stage. The lights were bright, blinding me to the audience for a moment. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the dark expanse where 500 industry leaders sat. I did not start with a joke. I did not start with an apology for being nervous. In a world where data is the new currency, I began, my voice clear and steady. Silence is not a strategy, it is a liability. For 45 minutes, I owned that room. I did not use notes. The data was not on a piece of paper. It was in my blood. I walked the stage with a calm, predatory grace, dismantling the old ways of corporate obscuration and building a new framework of radical transparency. I saw heads nodding in the front row. I saw people taking notes furiously. I saw the faces of CEOs and directors, people who intimidated the old Haley, looking at the new Haley with something that felt distinct and heavy, respect. When I finished, the applause was not polite. It was robust. It was the sound of people who had learned something. I walked off stage and was immediately swarmed. It was a different kind of attention than the soft tribunal of Riverton Heights. These people did not care about my marital status. They cared about my brain. That was brilliant, a CTO from a major logistics firm said. Shaking my hand, the way you framed the latency issue? Revolutionary. I exchanged business cards. I accepted invitations to coffee. I felt a physical shift inside my chest, like a tectonic plate settling into a new, stable position. I was not just surviving the separation anymore, I was expanding. My universe was getting bigger, and in this vast, exciting new landscape, Caleb Rourke was becoming a very small, very distant dot. I needed a moment to decompress. I excused myself from a conversation with a recruiter and walked toward the hydration station in the foyer. I poured a glass of water with cucumber slices. I took a sip, closing my eyes for a second to savor the silence in my head. Haley. The voice came from my left. It was familiar, but it sounded wrong in this context, like a radio station bleeding into a secure frequency. I lowered the glass. I turned. Caleb was standing 3 feet away. He was wearing a suit I knew, a navy bespoke number we had picked out together in London. He looked polished, handsome, the very picture of the rising star he claimed to be. But up close, I saw the cracks. There was a tightness around his eyes, a restlessness in his hands. He looked like a man who was holding his breath. Caleb, I said. My tone was neutral. It was the tone I used for the barista who got my order wrong. Polite acknowledgement of an inconvenience. He smiled. But it did not reach his eyes. I didn't know you were speaking. He lied. I just happened to be in town for meetings with some investors. Saw the signage, and thought I would duck in. Total coincidence. I looked at him. We both knew it was not a coincidence. The registration fee for the summit was $2,000. You did not duck in. He had tracked me. He had seen the agenda. He had likely been sitting in the back of the room during my presentation. Watching the woman he called boring command the respect of his peers, I took a sip of water. It is a big summit, I said. Hard to miss the signs. He stepped closer, invading my personal space by 6 inches. I did not step back. I held my ground, forcing him to look up slightly to meet my eyes. Thanks to my heels. You were incredible up there, he said. His voice dropped to that intimate register he used to use when he wanted something. Really? I mean, I always knew you were smart. Hales. But that was next level. You sounded powerful. He was trying to flatter me. He was trying to take credit for discovering me. I always knew you were smart. Thank you, I said. He waited for me to return the compliment. He waited for me to ask him why he was meeting investors, to ask him about his big deals. I said nothing. I just looked at him, waiting for the performance to continue. He shifted his weight, The silence made him uncomfortable. "It is weird seeing you here," he said, chuckling nervously. "Reminds me of that conference in Denver. Remember? We stayed up all night ordering room service and critiquing the keynote speakers. You laughed so hard you spilled wine on the duvet. Nostalgia. The second tactic. He was trying to transport me back to a time when things were good, trying to trigger a sense of shared history. He wanted me to smile. He wanted to see a flicker of the wife who adored him. I remembered Denver. I remembered that he had spent the entire night complaining about his boss and that I had spilled the wine because he had tossed a pillow at me in frustration. Not because we were laughing. "I remember," I said flatly. He frowned slightly. Sensing that the hook wasn't catching, he adjusted his cuff. "Look, Haley," he said, his voice dropping lower, becoming serious and somber. "I know things have been messy. I know I haven't been perfect. I've been doing a lot of thinking since you left, a lot of self-reflection." He paused for effect. This was the remorse phase. "I shouldn't have said what I said that night." He continued. "I was stressed. I didn't mean it. I miss you. The apartment it's too quiet without you. I feel like I lost my best friend." He reached out, his hand hovering near my elbow. He expected me to soften. He expected the tears. He expected the Haley who needed his approval to come rushing to the surface. Grateful for these crumbs of apology, but he was talking to a stranger. I looked at his hand until he dropped it. Then I looked at his face. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no love, no sadness. Just a profound sense of boredom. He was a bad actor in a play I had already walked out of. "Caleb," I said, my voice calm and final. "I am working. I have a lunch meeting in 5 minutes." His face twitched. The mask slipped. The remorseful husband vanished, replaced by the entitled man who had left me a voicemail calling me a coward. 5 minutes? He scoffed, his voice rising. "We were together for 6 years. Haley, you can't just brush me off like a vendor. We have a life. You can't just erase me because you got a promotion and a new haircut." People were starting to look. A few heads turned near the hydration station. Caleb liked an audience, but only when he was the hero. He lowered his voice, leaning in, his eyes narrowing. "You are acting like you are above this," he hissed, "like you are some corporate superstar. But I know you. Haley, I know who you really are. You are the girl who was grateful I looked at her." The insult landed on me like a feather on steel. I set my water glass down on the high-top table. I squared my shoulders. I looked him dead in the eye, and I saw him for what he was. Small. He was so incredibly small. "I didn't erase you. Caleb," I said, my voice quiet but razor-sharp. "I outgrew the version of me who tolerated you." The words hit him. I saw the shock register in his pupils. He opened his mouth to speak, to argue, to hurt me, but I didn't give him the chance. "Goodbye, Caleb," I said. I turned my back on him. I started to walk away, toward the double doors where the sunlight was streaming in, toward my lunch meeting, toward my future. I heard his footsteps behind me. Then they stopped. "You think you are better than me now?" The whisper was low, venomous, and it carried a weight that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't the lash out of a hurt lover. It was the threat of a competitor. "Don't get too comfortable." "Haley," he whispered, "you are not the only one with a strategy." I did not turn around. I kept walking, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I exited the ballroom and stepped into the lobby. My heart was beating fast, not from heartbreak, but from adrenaline. That whisper was not a goodbye. It was a declaration of war. He wasn't just here to win me back. He was here to assess the target. He had seen me rise, and his ego couldn't handle the altitude. I walked toward the elevators, pulling out my phone. I sent a text to Naomi. He was here. It wasn't a coincidence. Watch the Vanguard files. I had outgrown him. Yes, but as the elevator doors closed, shutting out the noise of the summit, I realized that growth didn't just bring freedom, it brought new, more dangerous predators. And Caleb Rourke had just stopped hunting for a wife and started hunting for a kill. The high from the Meridian Summit lasted exactly 48 hours. I returned to the office on a Tuesday, carrying the momentum of a woman who had just shifted the industry standard. My inbox was full of connection requests from CEOs and directors. I felt untouchable, encased in the armor of my own competence, but gravity has a way of asserting itself. And in the corporate world, gravity usually arrives in the form of a summons from human resources. At 10 in the morning, an email popped up from Linda, the director of HR, subject, urgent. Please come to my office immediately. There was no pleasantry, no exclamation point, just the cold command of bureaucracy. I walked into Linda's office. Marcus, the managing partner, was already there. He was standing by the window, his back to me, looking out at the gray cityscape. The air in the room was stale, recycled, and thick with tension. Linda did not ask me to sit. She pointed to a chair. On her desk sat a thick manila envelope. It was unnamed, unmarked, and ominous. We received a packet this morning. Haley, Linda said, her voice tight. It was delivered anonymously by courier. It contains serious allegations regarding your conduct. I looked at the envelope. I did not reach for it. What kind of allegations? I asked. My voice was steady, but my pulse began a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. Linda opened the flap and slid a stack of papers across the mahogany surface. Allegations of gross misconduct, she said. Misuse of company resources. Intellectual property theft. The claim states that you have been running a private consulting side business using Argent Veil proprietary data and client lists. It alleges that the framework you presented at the summit was not developed for Argent Veil, but was lifted from a private client you are servicing off the books. I stared at her. It was a lie so bold, so inverted, that it took me a moment to process the geometry of it. I picked up the papers. The top sheet was a typed summary, written in a dry, pseudo-legal style. I flipped to the evidence section. My stomach dropped. There were screenshots of my files. There were excerpts from the Vanguard Initiative, the black box project I had just started. There were timestamps of late-night logins. This is detailed, Marcus said. Finally turning around, he looked tired. He looked disappointed. This is not just a disgruntled rumor. Haley, someone has receipts. I scanned the pages. The formatting was impeccable. The dates were accurate. But the context was twisted. A login at 2 a.m, which I had done to meet a deadline, was framed as illicit data extraction. A file transfer to a secure server was framed as offloading assets to a personal drive. But it was the third page that made my blood freeze. It was a draft of a strategy document for a logistics company. It was my work. I recognized the syntax. I recognized the specific way I formatted my pivot tables. But the header on the document had been altered. It did not say Argent Veil. It was blank. I looked closer at the text. Utilization of the recursive efficiency model. I stopped. I had written that phrase 6 months ago in a draft that never went to the client. I had written it on my laptop at home, sitting at the kitchen island in Riverton Heights. I looked up at Marcus and Linda. The panic that had threatened to rise was suddenly gone, replaced by a cold, sharp realization. This is not a whistleblower report. I said, this is a weapon. Haley, Linda began, this evidence is damning. If you are consulting on the side. I am not consulting on the side. I interrupted. I tossed the papers back onto the desk. Look at the dates of the file excerpts. Linda, look at the metadata summaries. I pointed a finger at the page. August 12th, September 5th, October 14th. So? Marcus asked. Those are the dates I reported to IT. I said, those are the dates my account was accessed from an unauthorized device in Riverton Heights. The room went silent. I stood up. I need to see Ben in IT. I said, now, and I need you to come with me. Because this packet was not assembled by a concerned colleague. It was assembled by the person who broke into my account. We walked down to the server room in a grim procession. Ben Schroeder looked up, surprised to see the managing partner in his domain. Ben, I said, cutting through the pleasantries, I need you to run a comparison. I handed him the evidence from the packet. I need you to cross-reference these file excerpts with the access logs you pulled for me last week, specifically the ones from the Riverton Heights IP address. Ben took the papers. He typed for a moment, his eyes darting back and forth between the physical page and his screens. It took him 5 minutes. 5 minutes to dismantle the lie. Here, Ben said, pointing to a line of code on his monitor. The document in this packet, the metadata is scrubbed, but the file hash matches a download event from September 5th. And who downloaded it? Marcus asked, leaning in. The user credentials were Haley's. Ben said, but the device ID? It is the iPad, the one associated with the unauthorized residential IP. Marcus straightened up. He looked at me. The disappointment in his eyes was replaced by horror. Your ex-husband? He asked. I nodded. He didn't just steal my work to learn from it. I said, my voice quiet. He stole it to frame me. He waited until I had a win, until the summit, and then he sent this. He took the files he stole, stripped the headers, and sent them to you claiming I was the one stealing them. It was a scorched earth tactic. Caleb knew he couldn't compete with me, so he decided to destroy the playing field. If I was fired for theft, my presentation at the summit would be discredited. The architecture of trust framework would become toxic, and then, conveniently, someone else could step in and claim the ideas as their own. But why? Linda asked. Why go to this length? It is psychotic. It is not just spite. I said, it is strategy. I left them in the server room and went to find Naomi. I needed the final piece of the puzzle. I found her in the break room, stirring sugar into a coffee. Naomi, I said, you told me Caleb was at a mixer with Veronica Lane. You said he was name-dropping my concepts. Naomi nodded, sensing the urgency in my tone. Yeah, why? I need to know who he is pitching. I said, I need to know where he is trying to land. Naomi pulled out her phone. She tapped a few times, scrolling through her network. I have a friend who works in HR at Stratosphere. She said, that is Veronica's firm. Let me ask. She sent a text. We waited. The fluorescent lights of the break room hummed. My career, my reputation, my sanity. It was all hanging on a text message. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed. Naomi read the screen. Her eyes widened. Holy hell. She whispered, What? I asked. He is in final rounds for a director of operations role at Stratosphere, she said. And Haley, the presentation he submitted for his final interview? My friend says the internal title is The Trust Architecture, Optimizing Supply Chains. The air left my lungs. There it was, the twist. Caleb wasn't just trying to get me fired. He was trying to erase my authorship. He was pitching my framework to a rival firm, Veronica's firm, as his own original idea. But he knew that if I was still employed at Argent Vale, still rising, still speaking at summits, I would eventually see it. I would sue him. I would expose him. So he had to kill my credibility first. He had to make me look like a thief so that when he invented the framework at Stratosphere, no one would believe me if I claimed it was mine. He was essentially trying to murder my career to build a staircase for his own. And Veronica Lane? She wasn't just a girlfriend. She was his sponsor. She was part of the upgrade narrative. She was the gatekeeper to the new life he felt he deserved. And my intellectual property was the price of admission. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my chest. It was different from the anger I had felt before. This was not emotional. This was professional. He had tried to steal my livelihood. He had tried to starve me out. I walked back to the executive suite. Marcus and Linda were waiting in the conference room. I have the motive, I said, placing my phone on the table. I explained everything. The interview at Stratosphere, the title of his pitch, the connection to Veronica Lane. He is attempting to sell stolen Argent Vale intellectual property to a competitor. I said, and he tried to get me fired today so that there would be no one left to challenge his claim to the work. Marcus looked pale. This went beyond a domestic dispute. This was corporate espionage with a side of malicious prosecution. We need to launch a formal investigation. Marcus said, immediately. Legal needs to get involved. We need to send a cease and desist to Stratosphere regarding the IP. Wait, I said, They looked at me. If you send a cease and desist now, he will just claim it is a misunderstanding. I said, he will spin it. He will say he was inspired by me. He will hide the files. Then what do you suggest? Linda asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I want you to let him think he won, I said. For 48 hours, let him think the packet worked. Let him think I'm under investigation. Why? Marcus asked. Because if he thinks I am neutralized, he will get sloppy, I said. He will present that pitch deck to Stratosphere. He will put his name on my work in a formal setting, and once he does that, once he officially sells stolen goods, we don't just have a lawsuit, we have a career-ending event. Marcus looked at me. He saw the strategist I had become. He saw the cold, hard logic that Caleb had tried to crush, now turned against him like a bayonet. Okay, Marcus said. We open the investigation file today. We document everything, but we keep it quiet. We let him walk into the trap. Linda nodded. I will advise the team that this is a confidential matter. No one speaks to anyone outside this room. I stood up. Thank you, I said. I went back to my office. I did not do any work. I sat in my chair and watched the city lights turn on as the sun went down. I felt like a ghost in my own life. I was the bait, the trap, and the hunter all at once. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text message. Unknown number. I stared at it. I didn't need a name to know who it was. The timing was too perfect. He would have tracked the courier. He would know the packet had been delivered. He would be waiting for the fallout, waiting for the news that Haley Morgan had been escorted out of the building. I opened the message. Stop this before you embarrass yourself. You are out of your league. I read the words. Embarrass yourself. Out of your league. It was the same tone he had used in the bathroom, the same tone he had used when he told me he wondered why he chose me. He thought he was the director of the play. He thought he was writing the ending. I didn't reply. I didn't block the number. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the receipts folder. Then I opened a new file on my computer. I titled it Stratosphere IP Comparison. I began to assemble the side-by-side comparison of my work and the insights he was peddling. I was not out of my league. I was the one who built the league, and in 48 hours, Caleb Rourke was going to find out that he wasn't a player. He was just a trespasser. The notification landed in my inbox on a Wednesday morning, not from Caleb and not from a friend, but from a Google alert I had set up weeks ago for Stratosphere Consulting. It was a press release, glossy and full of buzzwords, announcing their upcoming Innovators in Action panel. I clicked the link. The banner image featured 4 people standing in confident poses against a city skyline. Second from the left, wearing the navy suit he had worn to the Meridian Summit, was Caleb. Below his face, the text read, Caleb Rourke, Director of Operations Design, pending. Topic, the future of frictionless supply chains. He was listed as a rising star. The event was scheduled for Friday afternoon. It was to be held at the Stratosphere headquarters in downtown St. Louis, and crucially, it would be live-streamed to a global audience of industry professionals. Caleb was not just looking for a job. He was looking for a coronation. He wanted the applause. He wanted the public validation that he was the visionary he claimed to be. I sat in my office at Argent Vale, the glow of the monitor illuminating the cold determination in my eyes. He was going to stand on a stage and present my work, my proprietary frameworks, as his own entry into the upper echelons of the corporate world. He was gambling everything on the assumption that I was too broken, too scared, or too under investigation to stop him. He was wrong. I walked to Marcus's office. The investigation team, Linda from HR Marcus, and Eleanor, the external counsel I had retained, were already assembled. The atmosphere was not frantic. It was heavy with the weight of impending execution. The timing is tight, Haley, Eleanor said, looking up from a stack of documents. The panel is in 48 hours. If we move too soon, he claims it is a draft. If we move too late, the IP is already out in the wild, and we are fighting a damage control battle instead of a prevention battle. We do not move yet. I said, taking a seat. We wait until the morning of the panel. We let him wake up thinking he is a winner. We let him put on his tie. We let him drive to the venue. I refused to engage in petty sabotage. I did not want to slash his tires or hack his slide deck. That was amateur hour. I wanted this to be airtight. I wanted the takedown to be so bureaucratically perfect that no amount of charm could wiggle him out of it. We focused on the chain of custody. We needed to prove not just that the work was similar, but that the file origin was identical. Ben from IT had been working overtime, mapping the digital DNA of the documents Caleb had stolen. "We have the login logs," Ben said, projecting a timeline onto the wall. "We have the IP address match. We have the file hash comparison. But the defense will argue that he had implied permission because you were married and shared devices. They will say he stumbled upon it and was inspired by it. We need to prove he knew it was theft." Eleanor added, "We need a smoking gun that shows intent to conceal." I stared at the timeline. There was something missing. I went back to my desk to think. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a message on LinkedIn. The sender was Veronica Lane. I felt a spike of adrenaline. Veronica was smart. She was the one pulling Caleb up the ladder, and she was likely the one sensing the vibrations in the web. She knew something was wrong. Caleb might be arrogant enough to think I had vanished, but Veronica was a shark, and sharks notice when the water goes still. "Hi, Haley," the message read. "I know things are complicated right now, and I generally try to stay out of personal histories, but I wanted to reach out woman to woman. Caleb is really excited about this panel. It represents a fresh start for him. I know there is some bad blood, but I was hoping we could keep the professional sphere neutral. I would hate for rumors to overshadow the work. Let's grab coffee?" I read it twice. Woman to woman. It was a classic manipulation tactic. Trying to leverage gender solidarity to cover up a crime. She was fishing. She wanted to know if I was planning a scene. She wanted to know if I had receipts. She was nervous about the rumors, because rumors ruin stock prices. I did not feel jealous of her. I felt a strange sense of pity. She had bought a lemon, and she was trying to polish it before the warranty expired. I did not ignore her. I needed her to feel safe, but I also needed to set a boundary that would look definitive in court. I typed my reply. I did not use emojis. I did not use exclamation points. "Hello, Veronica. I have no interest in rumors. I am not competing with Caleb. I am documenting. Enjoy the panel. I hit send. I am documenting." It was a vague enough phrase to sound like I was just keeping a journal, but specific enough to send a chill down the spine of anyone who knew what liability looked like. I went back to the data. I was looking for the link. How did he get the most recent files? The initial breach was via the iPad, but the Stratosphere pitch deck contained data I had only generated 3 weeks ago, after I had changed my passwords. I called Naomi. She came to my office, closing the door behind her. "He has something else," I said. "He has a back door I haven't found. He is quoting data from the Vanguard preliminary review. I only wrote that 10 days ago." Naomi frowned. She sat at my desk and opened her laptop. "Did you ever share a cloud storage folder?" she asked. "Dropbox? Google Drive? OneDrive?" "No," I said. "We kept our work separate." "What about a physical backup?" she asked. "Did you ever use a hard drive to transfer photos or music?" I stopped. 3 years ago, we had bought a 2-terabyte external drive to back up our wedding photos and tax returns. It was a networked drive, plugged into the router at the house in Riverton Heights. I had set it up to automatically back up my documents folder every Friday night at midnight. When I left, I took my laptop. I took my passport, but I left the router. I left the drive plugged in. And because I hadn't reformatted my laptop since I moved, the backup script was still running in the background. Every Friday, my laptop, connected to the internet in my studio apartment, was quietly sending a copy of my new work to the drive sitting in Caleb's study. He wasn't hacking me. I was feeding him, and he knew it. He had likely seen the new files appearing in the Haley backup folder and realized he had a direct line to my brain. I felt sick. Then I felt furious. I called Ben. "Check the outgoing traffic from my laptop," I said. Look for an FTP transfer on Friday nights. Ben typed furiously. 10 seconds later, he swore softly. There it is, he said. 7 gigabytes transferred last Friday. Destination YP is the Riverton Heights router. We had him. This wasn't implied permission. This was him accessing a backup of my current post-separation work. He was actively harvesting data from a device I was using in a different zip code. It was digital wiretapping. We have the link. I told Marcus. The mood in the room shifted from tense to predatory. We didn't just have a pattern. We had a pipeline. We spent Thursday compiling the final affidavit. It was a masterpiece of corporate law. It detailed the unauthorized access, the IP theft, the metadata matches, and the active data siphoning via the backup drive. It was not a complaint. It was a coroner's report on Caleb's integrity. Thursday night, I went home to my empty studio. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the quiet I had fought so hard to keep. My phone chimed. It was an email from Caleb. Subject: Thinking of you. I opened it. Haley, I know we haven't spoken. I just wanted to say that I understand now. I understand why you left. I was too much. I was pushing too hard. I am doing this panel tomorrow, and a lot of the work is inspired by the conversations we used to have. I just wanted to thank you for pushing me to be better. I hope you are watching. I stared at the screen, inspired by the conversations we used to have. He was planting a paper trail. He was trying to create a narrative where my intellectual property was just pillow talk that he had absorbed. He was trying to immunize himself against the theft by calling it inspiration. And the line I understand now? It was the ultimate insult. He didn't understand anything. He thought understanding was a get-out-of-jail-free card. He thought if he admitted to being too much, I would melt and forgive the fact that he was currently stealing my career. It was too late. Understanding is internal. Accountability is external. And he was about to get a masterclass in the difference. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to Eleanor. Add this to the evidence pile. I wrote, admission of using my concepts. Friday morning arrived with a gray steel sky. I woke up at 5. I went to the gym. I lifted 155 pounds off the floor. I showered. I put on the same slate gray suit I had worn to the Meridian Summit. I arrived at the office at 8. The Stratosphere panel was scheduled for 1 o'clock. At 9:30, Marcus walked into my office. It is done, he said. Legal has finalized the packet. We have a courier en route to Stratosphere's general counsel. We also have a digital copy ready to send to the panel organizers. I nodded. I felt calm. It was the calm of a surgeon before the first cut. Do you want to watch it? Marcus asked. Yes, I said. I set up my laptop in the conference room. Naomi joined me. We sat in silence, drinking black coffee. At 12:45, the courier confirmed delivery. At 12:50, Eleanor received a phone call from Stratosphere's legal team. I could hear her voice through the glass wall of the conference room. It was crisp, professional, and devastating. Yes, we have forensic proof. Yes, the backup drive logs are verified. Mr. Rourke is currently in possession of stolen Argent Vale proprietary data. If he takes the stage and presents this material, Stratosphere will be named as a co-defendant in the IP lawsuit. We advise you to review the attached Exhibit C immediately. I watched the clock. 12:55. On the screen, the live stream feed for the Innovators in Action panel began. The camera panned over the audience. The room was full. I saw the back of Veronica Lane's head in the front row. She looked poised, ready to applaud her investment. The moderator walked onto the stage. He looked flustered. He was holding a piece of paper, and he was whispering to a stagehand. I leaned forward. Caleb was supposed to be the first speaker. The moderator tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Innovators panel. We have had a slight adjustment to the schedule today. My phone buzzed. It was a forwarded calendar invite from a colleague at another firm who was attending the event. Forwarded. Updated agenda. I opened it. Caleb's name had been scrubbed from the keynote slot. His name was now listed at the very bottom, in a breakout session that was TBD, but it was the title of the panel discussion that made me pause. The moderator cleared his throat. Due to an unforeseen scheduling conflict, Mr. Rourke's presentation on supply chains will be postponed. Instead, we are moving up our roundtable discussion. He smiled, a tight, nervous smile that told the entire room that something had gone horribly wrong backstage. The topic for this afternoon's roundtable will be ethics in the modern corporate landscape. I looked at the screen. I looked at Naomi. Naomi's jaw dropped. "You have got to be kidding me," she whispered. I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my throat. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a sharp, jagged sound of pure incredulity. Caleb Rourke, the man who had gaslighted his wife, stolen her work, and framed her for misconduct, had been pulled off stage minutes before his big moment, only to be replaced by a discussion on ethics. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I didn't laugh, though. I just let out a long, slow breath. I closed the laptop. "Is it over?" Naomi asked. "No," I said, standing up and smoothing out my blazer. "The presentation is over. The consequences are just beginning." I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere, 10 blocks away, Caleb was standing in a green room, likely screaming at a bewildered assistant, his phone blowing up with calls from legal. The applause he wanted was gone. The love he didn't value was gone. All that was left was the truth. And for a man like Caleb, that was the most terrifying thing in the world. The atmosphere in my office on the day of the stratosphere panel was not electric. It was hermetically sealed. I had not taken the day off to sit in the audience and heckle. I was not standing in the back of the room wearing a trench coat and sunglasses like a villain in a melodrama. I was sitting at my desk at Argent Vale Strategies, wearing my usual silk blouse and reviewing a quarterly budget for a retail client. Revenge, I had learned, is best served not cold, but efficiently. At 12:30, 30 minutes before the live stream was scheduled to begin, Marcus walked into my office. He did not look like a man who was enjoying the destruction of a career. He looked like a surgeon who had just successfully excised a tumor. He closed the door and sat on the edge of my desk. "Legal just got the confirmation," he said quietly. "Stratosphere's general counsel signed for the digital packet at 12:14. They have reviewed the file comparison. They have the affidavit from Ben regarding the backup drive." "And?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "And they are freaking out," Marcus said. "They have a keynote speaker who is about to go live to 3,000 industry leaders, and they just found out his entire presentation is stolen property that carries a massive liability risk. They are not going to let him present the supply chain deck. They cannot. If they do, they become complicit in the theft." I looked at the clock on my computer screen. 12:32. In a building 10 blocks away, Caleb was likely standing in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie, rehearsing his opening joke, completely unaware that the floor beneath him had already been dissolved. I did not feel a rush of joy. I felt a grim satisfaction. This was the machine working exactly as it was designed. We had not spread gossip. We had not posted vague threats on social media. We had provided verified, time-stamped, forensic documentation. We had used the bureaucracy of the corporate world, the very thing Caleb mocked as boring, to dismantle him. At 12:40, my phone began to buzz. It sat on the desk, vibrating against the wood. I looked at the screen. Caller. Caleb Rourke. I did not answer. I pressed the side button to silence it. 2 seconds later, it buzzed again. Caller. Caleb Rourke. Then again. Caller. Caleb Rourke. He was not calling to apologize. He was calling because someone at Stratosphere, likely a panicked stage manager or a grim-faced lawyer, had just whispered something in his ear. He was calling because he realized that the glitch in his plan was not a technical error, but a person. He called 4 times in 1 minute. It was the digital equivalent of pounding on a locked door. I picked up the phone. I did not answer. I tapped the information icon. I scrolled down. Block caller. The buzzing stopped. The silence returned. Then, a text message arrived. It was not from Caleb. It was from Veronica Lane. I picked up the phone to read it. "What did you do? Legal is pulling him. They are saying there is a flag on the content. Haley, this is going to humiliate him. Why are you doing this? I stared at the words. Why are you doing this? It was a fascinating question. To Veronica, and to Caleb, my refusal to be a victim was interpreted as aggression. They believed that by reclaiming my own work, I was attacking them. They believed that I was supposed to let him climb the ladder using my bones as rungs because humiliating him was worse than him stealing from me. I typed my reply. I did not type it with anger. I typed it with the precision of a final invoice. I didn't do anything. Veronica, I stopped protecting your illusion. I hit send. Then I put the phone face down. I opened the live stream link on my second monitor. The feed was live. The room was packed. The energy was high, buzzing with the chatter of people waiting for innovative insights. The stage was set with 4 chairs and a podium. At 1 o'clock exactly, the lights dimmed, the music faded. Caleb walked onto the stage. I watched him closely. To the casual observer, he looked fine. He was smiling. He waved to someone in the front row. But I knew him. I had studied him for 6 years. I saw the tension in his jaw. I saw the way his eyes darted toward the wings of the stage, looking for someone, looking for an exit, looking for an explanation. He looked like a man who had been shoved onto the stage at gunpoint. He sat in the second chair. He crossed his legs. He uncrossed them. He adjusted his microphone pack. He was over-smiling, a rictus of confidence that looked brittle enough to snap. The moderator, a senior vice president at Stratosphere named David Chen, walked to the podium. He did not look happy. He looked like a man who was holding a grenade. "Welcome, everyone, to the Innovators in Action panel," David said. His voice was professional, but there was a strain in it. "We are excited to have you all here, both in the room and joining us via the live stream." He paused. He looked down at his notes. He took a breath that was audible over the microphone. "Before we begin, we have a slight adjustment to the program," David announced. I saw Caleb flinch. It was small, just a tightening of his shoulders, but it was there, due to an internal compliance issue regarding pending intellectual property clearance. David said, the words heavy and distinct. "Mr. Rourke will not be presenting his keynote on supply chain friction today." The room went quiet. Internal compliance issue is corporate code for something is legally radioactive. It is not a phrase you use for a technical difficulty. It is a phrase you use when lawyers are involved. Cameras were rolling. 3,000 people were watching. David continued, rushing slightly to get past the awkwardness. Instead, Mr. Rourke will be joining our general roundtable discussion, and we will be pivoting the topic to a broader conversation about operational ethics. Caleb's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of gray and crimson. He reached for his water glass. His hand shook. He set it back down without drinking. He leaned into his microphone. He could not help himself. He could not sit there and let the narrative slip away. He had to control it. "Thanks, David," Caleb said. His voice was too loud. It boomed over the speakers, causing a slight feedback whine, just a minor misunderstanding with the legal team regarding some proprietary data sourcing. You know how lawyers get. He laughed. It was a hollow, barking sound. Nobody in the audience laughed with him. A misunderstanding. I sat back in my chair at Argent Vale. The word hung in the air between us, transmitted over fiber optic cables from his ruin to my sanctuary. A misunderstanding. That was the word he had used when I confronted him about the mirror scene. It was just a misunderstanding. "Haley, you are too sensitive." That was the word he had used when he missed my birthday dinner to have drinks with a client. It was a scheduling misunderstanding. That was the word he used to dismiss my pain, to minimize his cruelty, to erase his accountability. He thought he could use it now to erase a documented case of corporate espionage. He thought misunderstanding was a magic spell that would make the evidence disappear. But the moderator, David, did not smile. He looked at Caleb with a cold, terrifying blankness. "Actually," David said, and his voice was ice, "compliance is rarely a misunderstanding. Caleb, but let's move on. The first question is about transparency and leadership. Caleb froze. The rebuke was public. It was professional. It was fatal. He sat there for the next 45 minutes, trapped in the spotlight he had craved. He could not leave. Walking off stage would be an admission of guilt. He had to sit there and answer questions about ethics while knowing that every person in the room and every person watching online was currently Googling Caleb Rourke compliance issue. He looked small. He looked diminished. The rising star aura had evaporated, leaving behind a man in a suit that was too expensive for his current reality. I watched him struggle to answer a question about credit where credit is due. He stumbled. He used buzzwords that meant nothing. He looked at Veronica in the front row, but the camera angle shifted, and I saw her looking down at her phone, disengaging, distancing herself from the sinking ship. At 1:45, the panel ended. The applause was polite, scattered. Caleb stood up and practically ran off the stage. I closed the browser tab. The office was quiet. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. I did not feel like celebrating. I felt tired. It was the exhaustion that comes after finishing a marathon that you never wanted to run. My computer pinged with an instant message from legal. From Eleanor Vance to Haley Morgan. Update: Stratosphere Legal just contacted us. They are pulling his candidacy for the director role effectively immediately. They are also initiating an internal audit of all materials he submitted during the interview process to ensure no other stolen IP is in their systems. They want to avoid a lawsuit. They are throwing him to the wolves. I read the message. Proceeding with a formal notice. Eleanor added, we are sending the cease and desist to his personal residence and his legal representation today. It cites the specific files, the access logs, and the unauthorized backups. It demands the immediate return of all Argent Veil data and a signed affidavit confirming deletion. The final domino had fallen. Caleb had not just lost a job opportunity, he had lost his reputation. In our industry, being flagged for IP theft is a death sentence. He would be radioactive. No reputable firm would hire a strategist who brought a lawsuit with him. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city of St. Louis. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shafts of light onto the wet pavement. I thought about the woman who had driven to a roadside motel in the middle of the night, terrified and small. I thought about the woman who had slept on an air mattress and counted her reps at the gym to keep from screaming. I was not that woman anymore. Caleb had wanted me to be a character in his story, the tragic, discarded wife. Instead, I had become the author of his ending. I went back to my desk. I opened the receipts folder one last time. I selected all the files, the screenshots, the emails, the audio logs, the legal briefs. I did not delete them. I moved them to an encrypted archive drive. I named the file Case Closed. I had work to do. The Vanguard initiative was launching next week, and I had a team to lead. I picked up the quarterly budget for the retail client. I uncapped my pen. The phone on my desk remained silent. The block was holding. The silence was absolute. And for the first time in my life, the silence did not feel like something that was happening to me. It felt like something I had built, brick by brick, to keep the noise out. The fallout from the Stratosphere panel did not result in a screaming match. Real catastrophes are rarely loud. They are quiet, suffocating, and absolute. 3 hours after the live stream ended, Caleb arrived at my building. I was sitting on my sofa, reading a book. When the intercom buzzed, it was a jarring sound in the stillness of my sanctuary. I did not jump. I marked my page. I walked to the wall monitor and pressed the video button. The camera feed was grainy, black and white, but clear enough to see the figure standing in the vestibule. Caleb was still wearing his suit from the panel, but the tie was loosened, hanging like a noose around his neck. His hair, usually lacquered into obedience, was disheveled. He looked less like a corporate shark and more like a man who had been shipwrecked. He pressed the buzzer again. Long, urgent. "Haley," he said. His voice came through the speaker tinny and distorted. "I know you are up there. I see the light. Just let me in. We need to debrief. Debrief. Even now, standing in the ashes of his reputation, he was using corporate speak. He was trying to frame this as a project that had gone over budget, something we could fix with a whiteboard and a strategy session. He thought if he could just get into my space, he could spin the reality until it pointed north again. I did not press the talk button. I did not tell him to go away. I did not give him the satisfaction of hearing my voice tremble or rise in anger. I watched him on the screen. He paced the small lobby. He looked at the camera, his eyes wild and pleading. "Haley, please," he said, his voice cracking. "They are talking about an audit. Stratosphere is talking about a lawsuit. I need you to tell them it was a misunderstanding. I need you to sign a release." Just 5 minutes. He was asking me to perjure myself to save the career he had tried to build on my grave. The audacity was breathtaking. I turned away from the monitor. I picked up my phone. I dialed the number for the building security desk. "Hello? This is Haley Morgan in Unit 4B. I said. My voice was calm, level. The voice of a woman ordering a taxi. "There is a man in the lobby who does not live here and does not have my permission to be here. He is harassing residents via the intercom. Please remove him." I did not say, "It is my husband." I did not say, "I am scared." I filed a report. I watched the monitor for 2 more minutes. I saw the night guard, a large man named Jerome, step into the frame. I saw him speak to Caleb. I saw Caleb gesture frantically, pointing at the ceiling, trying to charm, trying to explain. Jerome did not smile. He pointed at the door. Caleb looked at the camera one last time. His face was not filled with love. It was filled with the terrifying realization that his charm was a currency that was no longer accepted here. He turned and walked out into the night. I turned off the monitor. I went back to the sofa. I picked up my book. I did not read, but I sat there, breathing in the silence. It was the first time I had seen him since the summit, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt absolutely no responsibility for his emotions. His panic was his own. His ruin was his own. I was just the witness. Monday morning brought the official end of the upgrade narrative. I was at my desk when Eleanor Vance, my attorney, copied me on the final correspondence sent to Caleb's legal representation. It was a formal cease and desist, accompanied by a summary of evidence. The document was clinical. It was unstoppable. It listed every unauthorized login. It listed the IP addresses. It listed the 7 gigabytes of data transferred to the backup drive in Riverton Heights. It listed the file hash matches between my original work and his Stratosphere presentation. It concluded with a simple demand. Mr. Rourke will immediately cease all use of Argent Vale intellectual property, return all physical and digital copies, and refrain from any direct or indirect contact with Ms. Morgan. Failure to comply will result in immediate litigation for damages and criminal referral for corporate espionage. There was no wiggle room. There was no misunderstanding. It was a legal wall built 10 feet high. By noon, the news had hit the industry grapevine. Stratosphere Consulting released a brief statement. They did not name Caleb, but they didn't have to. Stratosphere is committed to the highest standards of integrity. We have withdrawn the candidacy for the Director of Operations Design position, pending an internal review of candidate materials. He had not just lost the job, he had been publicly flagged. In the small, incestuous world of high-level consulting, he was now radioactive. The ripple effect reached our social circle by Tuesday. For months, the mutual friends, Sophie, Dylan, the soft tribunal, had viewed our separation as a sad breakup, where perhaps I was being too harsh. They had bought Caleb's story of the confused, grieving husband, but theft changes things. It is one thing to be a bad husband. It is another thing entirely to steal your wife's work. Claim it as your own, and try to get her fired to cover your tracks. That is not a relationship issue. That is a character defect. Dylan was the first to flip. He sent me a text. I heard about the Stratosphere thing. I heard about the logs. Haley. I had no idea he was doing that. That is sick. I am sorry I pushed you to talk to him. I did not reply with a long paragraph. I sent a thumbs-up emoji. I did not need his apology, but I accepted his realization. Then came the silence from Tara Rourke. The cousin who had begged me to think of the family suddenly had nothing to say. There is no family loyalty that covers corporate fraud. The Rourke family prided themselves on status, and Caleb had just become a liability. They would close ranks, but not around him. They would close ranks to keep him out. And Veronica Lane? Her downfall was quieter, but just as complete. Naomi brought me the news over coffee on Wednesday. "She is out," Naomi said, blowing on her latte. "Who?" I asked. "Veronica. Stratosphere put her on administrative leave." I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" Naomi smirked. "Apparently, during the audit of Caleb's files, they found email threads between him and Veronica. She was coaching him on the pitch deck. She was giving him notes on your framework. There were messages where she explicitly asked him if Haley would notice the similarities." I shook my head. She knew. She knew it was stolen, and she didn't care. She thought she was helping her new power partner secure the bag. She violated her non-compete and her ethical compliance clause. Naomi said, "She is done. The power couple is unemployed." I felt a strange lack of vindication. I did not feel happy that Veronica lost her job. I felt a validation of my own reality. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I had been surrounded by people who viewed me as a resource to be harvested. And now, finally, the harvest was over. On Thursday, Marcus called me into his office. The mood was different this time. There was no tension. There were fresh flowers on the conference table. "Haley," he said, sitting down. "The Vanguard launch is next week. But we need to talk about your future here." I sat straight. I was ready. "You saved this firm a significant amount of liability," Marcus said, "and you protected our IP with a level of foresight I have rarely seen. We want to formalize your role." He slid a contract across the desk. "Director of Strategic Innovation." It came with a 30% salary increase. It came with equity. It came with a team of 3 junior associates who would report directly to me. "We want you to build out the trust architecture framework," Marcus said. "Officially, under your name. We want you to publish it. We want you to speak at the next summit, not as a fill-in, but as the headliner." I looked at the contract. I looked at the salary. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to never need anyone again. I signed it. I walked out of that office not as Caleb Rourke's ex-wife, but as Haley Morgan, director. Friday evening marked exactly 1 week since the panel. I was in my studio apartment, packing. I was moving to a new place the following month, a loft with big windows and no memories. But for now, I was still in the space that had saved me. My phone chimed with an email notification. I checked it. The sender was Caleb Rourke. My finger hovered over the delete button. But something made me pause. I opened it. It was not a manifesto. It was not a demand. It was 3 sentences. "Haley, I am not going to fight the legal notice. I am withdrawing from everything. You were right about the mirror. Goodbye." I read it once. "You were right about the mirror." He didn't explain what he meant. He didn't have to. We both knew. The mirror scene, where he told me he wondered why he chose me, had been a projection. He looked at me and saw the things he lacked. Integrity. Depth. The ability to build something real. He chose me because I filled the empty spaces in him, and when I stopped filling them, he collapsed. He wasn't apologizing for hurting me. He was acknowledging that I had seen him. For a narcissist, being truly seen, being perceived in all your smallness, is the ultimate defeat. I did not reply. There was nothing to say. His understanding came too late to save us. And frankly, I didn't need it to save myself. I selected the email. I hit delete. Then I went to the trash folder and hit empty trash. It was gone. I put my phone down on the counter. I poured myself a glass of wine. A cheap, dry red that I loved and he would have hated. I walked around my apartment. I touched the leaves of the pothos plant I had bought on my first day of freedom. I adjusted the framed print of a geometric abstract that cost $40. I turned on some music, a lo-fi jazz playlist that filled the room with a soft, warm rhythm. There was no echo of him here. There was no smell of his cologne. There was no tension waiting to snap. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. I saw the building where Stratosphere was located. I saw the skyline where the summit had been held. I realized then that revenge wasn't about the grand gesture. It wasn't about the public takedown, though that had been necessary. Revenge, the real kind, the kind that settles in your bones and keeps you warm, was this. I was standing in a room I paid for, holding a glass of wine I poured, thinking thoughts that were entirely my own. Caleb had feared being irrelevant more than he ever valued loving me. He wanted to be a protagonist so badly that he turned everyone else into props. But in the end, he had written himself out of the story. I took a sip of wine. I didn't win by crushing him. I didn't win by getting him fired or exposing his girlfriend. Those were just administrative tasks. I won by stepping out of his mirror and walking into my own life. And the view from here was beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving to work in London? Cooking dinner in Sydney? Or maybe relaxing in a cafe in New York? Please leave a comment below with your location and your thoughts on Haley's journey. And if you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Leona Revenge Stories. Like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this message of strength with even more people.